Hi everyone and welcome to this tutorial. In this episode we'll be looking at Tyflow's ripple effect. So we have our plane here, and what we can do is just create an actual plane. And we'll just change the size of it. We'll do a meter by a meter for this example. We'll just zoom back in on it. And we'll also turn on edged faces. And if we scroll down, we can change the segments. In this example, I'm going to do 100 by 100 segments. And if we go to the Forces tab and use geometric/deformable, we'll find the ripple effect or modifier. What we can do is we'll just drag this out to roughly around there, and we'll change the height to 0.08 for both amplitudes. And you can change the wavelength if needed, but for us that looks quite good. Then we want to click our plane, bind to space warp. So click, hold and drag onto the ripple, and that will modify our plane to that geometry settings, to the ripple settings, sorry. Then what we want to do is if we turn on auto key and we go to our last frame and we click on the ripple itself, the modifier we have placed, and change the phase to -4, which will be our last phase. And if we scroll through the timestamp, that you can see that the ripple moves the plane as it goes along, so it's slightly animated. And now we can just turn off edged faces, and we can also hide the ripple. Then the next thing we want to do is open up our Tyflow. So we'll just create our icon here, a bit out of the way for us, and then we can open up the editor. Just shrink our tab so you guys can see the geometry changing as we go along. And in this case, we want to use a birth surface. And for our surface, we'll pick the plane, and you can see the dots starting to spawn on there. We'll also add in a shape so we can change the display, and we'll make it a 3D object, and we'll use a cube. Now the display, we'll just change that to geometry. And obviously they're quite large considering the scale that we're working at. So we'll change the frequency to 0.8. And we'll also change the scale as well to 0.8. You can see that's a much better looking, and the cube's sort of flowing along that much more naturally. But you can make them whatever size you want, depending on what you need. Then we can go back into Tyflow, and we can add in an object bind, which will bind the cubes to the surface. So again, picking this plane, and we want to turn on lock to surface, and then we also want to turn on snap to surface. It can take some time to load, so we want it to snap to the surface, let it load. We can then go through and go back to our Tyflow and add in a scale tool. And this is where you can also change your scales after you put it underneath object bind. You can mess around with the scales, but our scale seems to be fine, so we can leave it as is. But if you change one, it will change all of them. But for timing, we want to change that down to continuous. And once that's done, I want to make sure, if you keep scrolling down, we'll change the scale to absolute, but obviously now it's messed up our scale, so we can change this scale value to 0.08, keeping it the same as what the shape scale was. Now that we've done that, we'll just check the proximity. And what we want to do is create a box, roughly the same size. And it doesn't matter about the height of it, but if we go to a side view and move it, what we want to do is make sure it's about the bottom of the box is reaching the top of where the cubes are. So around there is probably close to our placement that we want. And if we go back to our Tyflow, we we can do multiply by proximity, pick our object, which will be our box that we just created. And now that that's been added in, we can change the distance and the fall off. So we'll do 0.2, and we'll also change the fall off to 0.15. And what this will do is it will start to mean that when it ripples through, that the cubes will actually change size based on its proximity to the box. So we can hide that box now. And then what we want to do is you can see that the rippling now, the cubes follow along with it and do not operate separately to the plane itself. So that's how you create the ripple effect using Tyflow, a series of cubes that can flow along and animate with a plane. So I hope this is something you enjoyed and can find useful. Thanks for watching.